folks, Errol over here. Today we're actually doing a cooking video, which I've been too busy to make much time for this summer, but it's starting in the garden because what we're doing is making a kind of Mexican style chip dip coleslaw thing. And so the first thing I need is some cabbage. Now our cabbage has been doing pretty well this year, except I've been getting a lot of splitting heads, and I haven't really had that problem in the past, except for last year. They're splitting open like that when they should be nice and round and smooth. Last year I thought it was due to that we had so much excessive amounts of rain, but I'm getting a lot that are splitting this year, so I'm not sure why that's happening. Doesn't really hurt them, they just don't store as well, but we're not trying to store these, we're trying to use them. I'm going to take 2 heads here. I may not need quite that much cabbage, but that's what I'm going to take down there with me. And the other thing that we need fresh out of the garden is some onions. Most of my onions are still growing and getting larger to use through the winter, but I always plant a few of these purple onions. They don't keep as well for long-term storage, but I do like using them in some summer things. So I'm going to take this guy, just leave its top to compost, and when I pull an onion, you couldn't really see that, but I try to just slice the roots and leave them in the ground so I don't disrupt the soil any more than I need to. They could just fertilize the ground, and I think I want a second one, so which one do I want to pull here? It's breezy out here yet again, but I'm going to take these 2 onions and head into the kitchen. Okay, inside, cleaned up the onions and cabbage a little bit. That's the inconvenient thing when cabbage has split. You get some dirt and bugs kind of down inside the leaves in the spot that would normally be sealed up. Anyway, I don't know what to call this. Maybe it has a real name out there in the bigger world, but one time we went to a Mexican place together, which I don't got to eat very often, but every now and then, and kind of along with the chips and dip, they served, or like chips and salsa, just served this as well as salsa, and it was something we both really enjoyed eating. And so I think I can figure out what flavors are in there and imitate this at home, because we generally have a lot of cabbage. Cabbage tends to grow very well in our climate, and you've seen me use it for many things, making sauerkraut, making usually the purple for the Danish Christmas cabbage, etc. But we like to use cabbage because it grows well. So the first thing I'm doing is slicing my cabbage into relatively fine-ish slices, whatever texture you like, doesn't really matter. I know I haven't had time to do cooking videos in a while because I barely had time to actually get food together and eat it this summer is how it feels, much less record things, which always takes a little more time. But one of the fun things about cooking for yourself is you can make things exactly how you like them. So this is easier to do in a bowl that's a little extra large till you get this mix, then you can put it in something smaller, but having a little space is generally a good thing. Meow, I know I have a kitten meowing at me from the living room. You can come over here and hang out as long as you don't get on the kitchen counter. So I'm going to dice all this up, and then we're going to start mixing other flavors in. Of course, you don't have to start with cabbage out of your own garden. You can get it at a grocery store or whatever. But if you're in our cabbage is going to be all harvested shortly, but if you're in much of the country that is generally warmer than us, this is a pretty good time to be planting cabbage for a fall crop. We don't do that here because it's going to be winter before you know it here. But if you're planting any fall garden at all, it's a pretty good time to be planting cabbage. It likes cooler weather, so if you have very warm summers, it tends to do well in spring and fall. And I may not need all 2 heads. We'll see here how much we use for this. The first thing I want to do, once I get my cabbage sliced into my bowl here, and I'm going to start this with just what I have sliced already, is to get some salt on it, because the salt will start to draw the moisture out of the cabbage and let the flavor kind of get into the cabbage. I'm just sprinkling kind of liberally. That will start to draw liquid. Let that layer sit there. Some more here. If you guys have other favorite cabbage recipes, I'd be happy to hear them, because we have quite a few things, like I said, that we like. Also just sauteing cabbage with a little butter and salt, or water frying it and then adding some butter and salt. That's my favorite way to eat quite a few different veggies. Those cabbage hearts are going to go out to the chickens. They're just a little bit of thick texture for this. So we eat cabbage in a lot of forms, but it is something we got a lot of, so I'm always happy to hear more new favorite ways to use it from anybody else who's got some. And these heads are a little bit, like I said, neater to slice up if you don't have the issue with them splitting. I thought that tend to come from the plants having inconsistent water, like really dry and then a lot of rain. But we haven't had any water this year, really at all. We're at less than 2 inches of rainfall, I think, since last winter. And I have watered, therefore, pretty consistently about every other day in the garden. So I'm not entirely sure why I got so much splitting, but that's what happened this year. And it just makes them a little bit harder to slice up neatly. It doesn't otherwise hurt the flavor or anything like that. It's just not as convenient. And you lose a little cabbage to cutting off some of the split edges and so on that got brown. So this is going to look like a lot of cabbage, but cabbage is, like many veggies, full of a lot of water. So as that salt starts to draw liquid out of this, it's going to look like a lot less volume. So you probably want to start with a plenty oversized bowl for putting this together. So just a sec here, I'll be done with the cabbage and we'll go on to the next thing. Now you can see how heaping full this bowl looks with cabbage right now. I'm going to sprinkle another generous layer of salt over the top here. That's going to start drawing some water as well. While we go on to the next thing, which is to dice up our onions. And you could use any variety of onions you liked. Like I said, the purple ones don't keep real well for the winter, so I tend to use them for summer things. Just a little bit of purple in there kind of adds a pretty color. Like I've talked about in various gardening videos, I love growing multiple colors of things because usually each different, purple carrots have a slightly different, variety of micronutrients and anthocyanins and all that stuff compared to orange ones, compared to yellow ones. So I also grow purple and yellow and white onions and generally multiple varieties and colors of almost every kind of vegetable crop we grow. So I'm just dicing these, again, your texture preference. You can do them bigger or littler. I kind of like small chunks because with a raw onion, the flavor's plenty potent. And these might make me cry a little bit here in a second. Because they are pretty potent. Last year our onions lasted until within like a week of me feeling okay with picking the very first of our new onions for the year. So that was perfect. We got a full year's worth of onion supply out of the garden. They're also going to make my nose run. And we eat a lot of onions through the year. So I think, I don't remember what we had. Many, many tens of pounds. It might have been like 160 pounds or something of onions last year. And hopefully we'll get a comparable crop this year. When you talk and cut onions, it really makes your eyes burn. Now, as we get this going, I'm going to kind of massage the cabbage just a bit. Salt should have been drawing water, and the onions are in here too. It wouldn't matter if they were or they weren't. Should be start to draw the water, and I'm literally just taking the cabbage and not crushing it. Cabbage is pretty firm, but squeezing it gently. That's going to break up some of the kind of cell structure in the cabbage just a little bit, which is going to tenderize it and help it soak up some of the flavors we're about to add to this. I enjoy this dish eaten just as like a coleslaw side with other things. Clay's favorite way is to enjoy it with chips, usually corn chips. Corn chips and crunchy things are one of his favorite foods. So you can use it either way and do both things. But if you've ever done this for making sauerkraut or anything else, you can kind of feel how the cabbage starts to tenderize just a bit when you squeeze it like this. And like I said, that's going to help it soak up the flavors of everything else we're about to put over it. And the salt will continue to help tenderize it. And this like massaging here is going to get the salt into it as well as the other flavors a little better and a little quicker. Now you can eat this, you know, practically as soon as you throw it together, but the flavors will be much better if it has at least a few hours for everything to kind of blend and saturate into the cabbage, and making it a day or two before is even better because the flavor kind of just gets better with time. So it's going to continue to do its salt soaking while we add other flavors here. And I'm going to add a little more salt sprinkle just on top. Obviously, I am not exactly measuring this. If I was guessing, I've done at least a good heaping 2 to 3 teaspoons, so close to a tablespoon of salt in there. And I may still add some more. Other flavors, I like to add some pepper to this. Fresh ground tends to have the best, richest flavor. But you can use any kind of pepper. Again, I'm just eyeballing this till the amount seems right to me. And you can do more or less depending on how peppery you like things. I'm actually not a big fan of black pepper myself, but it does add a nice little bit of flavor to this. I think one of the flavors that's a little less commonly used in a lot of American cooking is cumin. I use this for a few things. I'm going to do, say, a good heaping teaspoon there. If you're not measuring exactly, it's a good idea to pour into the lid of your spice thing so you don't end up with an entire pint of a particular seasoning in there. We are going to drizzle some olive oil on here. Just a little bit. Let's say that's like 1/3 of a cup. I'm going to add a little vinegar. I use the rest of this bottle because that's probably 1/2 cup or so in there. You could use red wine vinegar, rice vinegar. I tend to have a lot of apple cider vinegar around because that's what I use the most often, so that's what that is. You could do lemon or lime juice. I happen to have some. This is lemon juice, obviously not quite fresh squeezed. So we're going to do that. And these flavors are all going to start to soak into the cabbage and onions here. I'm going to stir every now and then. And as this sits, it'll go from having a big bowl of cabbage to the cabbage itself will shrink some, and the liquid that's pulled out of it by the salt and such will come up and kind of make a marinade that this will be sitting in. So you don't want to add vinegar and lemon juice till they're like up above the cabbage, because then you get also a lot of water out of the cabbage, and all of a sudden you have a giant bowl full of flavored cabbage liquid with only a few floaty cabbage chunks in it, if that makes sense. So that's going to keep doing its thing here for a minute. And let's put it off to the side and get my cutting board back. I'm going to put some tomatoes in. I'm going to use a variety of tomatoes here because they're the ones I happen to have on hand. That knife is not sharp enough to cut tomatoes. I just should sharpen it, or ask Clay to do that. He likes doing that for me. I'm going to dice these into kind of small chunks just because it's a nice texture if you are actually going to, you know, scoop up chips and such. Having too large of a chunk, it can be a little bit of a pain for that. We're going to make our little tomato cubes, and I also have some cherry tomatoes here that I'm going to slice in because they were the other thing I happen to have on hand. And there are multiple colors. The bright red tomatoes make a nice contrast with the pale green cabbage, the purple onions, and we're going to slice in some dark green jalapenos here as well. So that just kind of gives it a pretty color variety. But some of these other tomatoes that I have are yellow or kind of a green-red. And so that's what we're going to have this time in here. Okay, got our tomatoes sliced in there. Give this another stir. The cabbage is continuing to kind of soften and soak up that flavor, which is, like I said, why it's a nice thing if you can do this ahead. I think like multiple hours ahead gives you the best flavor, which makes it best leftover, which is awesome because in the summer especially, we tend to be quite busy. So if I can make a big bowl of something and then we can enjoy it for several days, that is perfect because we both like a lot of things left over, especially this kind of thing that's better left over than not. I am going to taste the cabbage. Right now all the flavors are like on the outside of the cabbage, and the cabbage just tastes like raw cabbage. But that tastes like it's probably going to be salty enough, etc., as that soaks in. Now last thing I'm going to do is add jalapenos, and I need one thing. I tend to be extremely sensitive to a lot of things. I can't handle a ton of spice, but also my skin is sensitive to a lot of things. So you could put a lot more things like jalapenos in here if you are more of a less of a wimp than me. But I have to be careful. Some jalapenos are mild enough that they don't affect my skin, but not all of them are. So when I'm cutting them up, I just wear a glove for the hand that is touching them. I'm going to do 5 jalapenos here. We got these from a farm stand that drives some produce over from neighboring state where it's just a little warmer than here, and they can grow things like peppers. I like to mince these into very fine pieces because they can be pretty powerful. So I don't like real big chunks, but once again, that's a personal preference thing, and if you like more spice or bigger pieces or whatever, you can do that. That's going to get some pretty dark green color into here. And I don't think most people find that they need to wear gloves when they touch jalapenos, but I'm a weirdo and I do. Okay, got the jalapenos in there. If you really don't want it to be spicy, you can take the seeds out of the middle. I do know those add some heat, but we are going to use that to flavor quite a large volume of cabbage here. And I can't show this, but I can feel the texture of the cabbage changing as it soaks in the vinegar and the salt. It's just kind of getting softer. But still, if you eat this right now, it will taste kind of like raw cabbage in the middle with flavors on the outside of it. But what we're going to do is we're just going to let this sit for a while, and we will be enjoying it later on. So that is our favorite, really pretty, I think, colorful, fresh veggie cabbage chip dip Mexican style coleslaw, whatever you'd like to call it. Give it a try. Let me know what you think. Thanks for spending your valuable time with us,
I hope you learned something interesting and useful.
or found something beautiful here.